I wanted to ask you, Laila, about your own family's experience, speaking of media malpractice, recently being smeared by the media. Can you set that up and tell people what happened?
Sure. Well, it's a bit of a long story, so maybe your audience can just Google my family. But my father, Dr. Laila Al-Arian, was a university professor in the U.S. for many years, but he was also a Palestine advocate and activist. And after 9/11, he was arrested. You know, it was this environment of fear and hysteria, kind of crackdown on Muslim institutions. And a lot of people who were anti-Palestinian kind of took advantage of that. And he was swept up in that, arrested and put on trial on material support for a designated terrorist organization, which is a Palestinian organization, along with 4 other men. It was this big sweeping kind of RICO case in Florida. He was actually acquitted after a 6-month-long trial. The government spent like millions of dollars trying to go after him, but they walked away. The jury did not convict him. And, you know, his case went on for another 12 years, really long story. He was eventually agreed to deportation because he was not a US citizen. He wasn't granted citizenship due to his Palestine activism. And anyway, that his case totally concluded in 2015 when he was deported. But my mom was visiting New York with me. I had a talk in New York, and she accompanied me to Columbia University, where there was the big Gaza encampment. She was really inspired by the students kind of standing up for Palestine. You know, I mentioned she had lost relatives in Gaza already. She has family that's been repeatedly displaced. So she was very much inspired by the students taking action and really showing that they cared about what's happening to people in Gaza. So she visited, and then my father simply tweeted a picture about it. And then this like onslaught campaign kind of began of, first it was like pro-Israel kind of accounts, just being like terrorist wife visits Columbia. But then what's really disturbing is the mayor of New York City used my mom without even naming her, saying, you know, the wife of a terrorist or something like that, to justify the horrific use of, you know, the NYPD going in to break up the takeover of Hamilton Hall, and use that as pretext for that.
But we've heard from your team that there are these nameless leaders who were involved. Can you tell us who they were, or at least how many of them there are?
Well, first, I always suspected that something was happening, and I'm happy that the confirmation of my suspicion turned out to be accurate when our intelligence division briefed me on 2 particular individuals. One of them, husband, was arrested for terrorism as well. Some of the paraphernalia and pamphlets that we saw, individuals we saw who were not CUNY students, were there training individuals. We saw the escalation of the tactics that were being used. And so it has been reported on some of the individuals that just stated. I choose not to give notoriety to people who participate in activities like that, but it has been online. The police department has reported, and I'm sure if you reach out to the intelligence division, they'll give you based on the information we want to release. And this is extremely active, continue to evolve, and we want to continue to do the thorough investigations that we have been doing.
So, and then the media, including a CBS reporter on Twitter, but also CNN, kind of went with it. And it was just, you know, yet another case of just uncritically reporting what, in this case, the mayor of New York City said. And his implication was that my mother, a 63-year-old grandmother and retired teacher, was somehow training up these students at Columbia. She had nothing to do with the encampment. She merely visited for like an hour. So it was a really disgusting twisting of the facts. And of course, you know, certain media outlets kind of, including the New York Post, by the way, which is especially egregious, in Fox News, and kind of your typical bad actors kind of went with it.
That put your family at risk, but it also put all the people at Columbia at risk, because what better way to justify force and potentially lethal force against people occupying Columbia than implying that there was a terrorist wife in there, you know, and potential terrorist, I mean, terrorist herself, right, is the implication also.
They know who my mom is. They know that she's, you know, a retired teacher and a grandmother, and that she just visited for a short time. They didn't care about the truth.
Right.
They just needed a cover story to justify sending in basically a SWAT team, like hundreds of police officers, to the Columbia campus to disrupt a protest by unarmed students. I mean, I'll never forget watching CNN that night. The coverage was awful.
Yeah.
But the reporter who'd covered the aftermath of the school shooting in Texas was like, I've never seen this much police presence. His name is Shimon, that reporter. He's like, I've never seen anything like this.
I have never seen a response like this, a mobilization like this. The way the NYPD came in with such force, with such precision.
Imagine you're a U.S. reporter covering the aftermath of school shootings, mass shootings. You don't see police showing up there, but, you know, hundreds of police officers or dozens of police officers showing up to a university campus for an unarmed, you know, peaceful protest. It's something. And, you know, of course they want to fear monger and use like the specter of terrorism and like kind of prey on people's biases. But what they didn't bargain on is the fact that this generation isn't having it. They see right through these lies. This is not the 90s and early 2000s anymore. People aren't falling for it.
It was actually Yasser Ali, who's not very, I wouldn't describe him as very progressive. He's certainly not very pro-Palestinian, but it was so egregious that this CBS reporter tweeted out that there was a terrorist wife in who had been at the encampment, that even he kind of shamed her for drawing false conclusions.
Yeah, she ended up deleting her tweet, actually, never to be heard from again, never apologized. But Yasser, I just think, is like a clout chaser. I don't actually think he cares about anything but like repaying whatever debts he has. Yeah, but I'll never forget this like horrible moment where Yasser demonized like just university students because like the Hezbollah leader gave a speech. This was like back in October, I think. And then Yasser tweets like, oh, these university students are like to the more extreme than the leader of Hezbollah. I just felt like he was totally fear mongering the students back then, you know.
Was it Anderson Cooper on? No, it wasn't Anderson Cooper who did he regurgitate the story about your mom?
Oh yeah, not my mom. No, not my mom. My mom, it was Laura Coates, who I think was filling in for Abby Phillips, like regular crime
also
time
terrible on this.
We're learning tonight that the wife of an indicted terrorist was on the campus last week. A source pointed to a post on X by Laila Al-Arian, a former University of Southern Florida professor who pleaded guilty to a charge of conspiring to provide services to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad in 2006. He posted on X last week showing a photo of his wife on the campus of Columbia University, saying, quote, "My wife Nala in solidarity with the brave and very determined Columbia University students."
It was just like one segment that she did, and then I think never again. But yeah, people definitely saw it and recorded it.
And what is it that Anderson Cooper had done? Because you seem to think I was talking about something else.
He was egregious that night. He was repeating this outside agitator.
Right, that's what it was.
He didn't mention my mom, but he kept repeating the outside agitator trope. And what was amazing, Kavitha mentioned earlier, they had phonos with students. The student journalists, like if you were listening to the Columbia radio show, they were like, no, these are all students that we know. I mean, they were doing like fact-based reporting, actual journalism. And Anderson Cooper and like the kind of network folks were just speculating, regurgitating like the mayor's talking points, the NYPD talking points. I mean, it was not journalistic in any way.
Right. And then the mayor was asked, and he couldn't provide a single example of an outside agitator. And then I also remember there was a police officer who came on, I think, Morning Joe, some MSNBC show, and showed an example of like violent chains that people had. And then it was like, oh, these are actually the chains that people lock up their bikes with.